It was a glorious late summer Saturday, the kind of day that seemed custom-made for family outings and the creation of sun-drenched memories. The sky above Redwood Creek, California, was a vast, cerulean canvas, brushed with wisps of cotton candy clouds. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the towering redwood trees that framed the zoo's perimeter, carrying with it the distant, thrilling roars of lions and the playful chatter of monkeys. The pathways of Redwood Creek Zoo hummed with a vibrant energy. Families, couples, and wide-eyed children ambled along, ice cream cones dripping in the warm air, souvenir maps clutched in eager hands. The scent of popcorn and freshly mown grass mingled with the more exotic, earthy aromas emanating from the various animal habitats. Among the throng were the Carter family, parents, Mark and Emily, and their 3-year-old son, Daniel. Daniel, a whirlwind of boundless energy and insatiable curiosity, was dressed in a bright yellow t-shirt and denim shorts, his sandy blonde curls bouncing as he skipped, occasionally tugging at his mother's hand to point at a scampering squirrel or a brightly colored parrot. For Daniel, the zoo was a wonderland, a place where the fantastical creatures from his picture books sprang to life. His parents watched him with a mixture of amusement and the usual parental vigilance, determined to make this a perfect day. They had already marveled at the languid grace of the giraffes, chuckled at the antics of the sea lions performing in their sprawling pool, and peered into the shadowy dens of the bears. Now, they found themselves drawn towards Gorilla Highlands, one of Redwood Creek Zoo's most popular and impressively designed exhibits. The habitat was a sprawling, naturalistic enclosure, meticulously crafted to mimic the gorilla's native African rainforest environment. A wide, deep moat filled with water and lined with smooth, impassable rock faces on the public side separated the viewing area from the gorilla's domain. Beyond the moat lay a landscape of rolling grassy mounds, strategically placed boulders the size of small cars, sturdy climbing structures made of thick logs, and pockets of dense foliage that offered the animals shade and privacy. A series of large, reinforced glass panels also provided closer, more intimate viewing points at different sections of the exhibit, allowing visitors to feel almost face-to-face with these magnificent primates. Several gorillas were visible, engaged in their daily routines. A young male, full of playful energy, wrestled with a large burlap sack, tossing it in the air and pouncing on it. An older female sat patiently, meticulously grooming a younger companion, their fingers moving with practiced care. And then there was Hannah. She was the undisputed leader, the matriarch of the troop, a magnificent silverback whose sheer size and commanding presence were awe-inspiring. Her fur was a deep, glossy black, with a characteristic saddle of shimmering silver hair across her broad back that denoted her maturity and high status within the group. She sat quietly near a cluster of bamboo shoots, her dark, intelligent eyes surveying her domain with a calm, almost regal air. She was, by all accounts, a creature of immense power, a wild animal whose instincts were honed by generations of survival in the dense jungles. The zoo staff, led by head keeper Mr. Peterson, respected her deeply, always aware of her incredible strength and the inherent wildness that no amount of curated habitat or daily interaction could ever fully tame. Daniel, like many children his age, was utterly captivated. He pressed his small hands against the cool metal railing that ran along the edge of the moat, his nose practically touching the barrier as he craned his neck, desperate for a better view of the gorillas moving below. His parents stood a few feet behind him, Emily rummaging in her oversized tote bag for a juice box and a snack, Mark pointing out one of the younger gorillas swinging from a rope to her. It was a moment of mundane distraction, the kind that happens 1,000 times on any family outing, a fleeting instance where parental focus momentarily shifted. A split second. In that infinitesimal slice of time, the unthinkable happened. Perhaps Daniel leaned too far forward, his small frame overbalancing as he tried to peer deeper into the enclosure. Perhaps he attempted to climb onto the lower rung of the railing for a higher vantage point, his new sneakers slipping on the smooth, sun-warm metal. No one saw the exact mechanics of the fall, only its horrifying, heart-stopping consequence. A small, startled gasp, a blur of yellow and denim, and then the sickening thud as Daniel tumbled over the barrier, down the steep, rocky incline of the moat's inner wall, and landed, with a terrible finality, on the hard-packed earth at the very edge of the gorilla's living space. He lay frighteningly still, a splash of bright color against the muted greens and browns of the enclosure floor, some 15 feet below the horrified onlookers. A collective scream ripped through the air, a raw sound of pure, unadulterated terror that shattered the afternoon's peace. Emily's juice box dropped from her nerveless fingers, her own cry a strangled sob as she lunged towards the railing, Mark grabbing her arm forcefully to prevent her from a frantic, impossible leap after their son. Panic erupted like a wildfire. People pointed, shouted, their faces masks of disbelief and horror. The joyous atmosphere of moments before evaporated instantly, replaced by a suffocating, palpable dread. Zoo staff, alerted by the sudden, piercing commotion and the urgent calls crackling over their radios, began to converge on the scene, their faces grim, their emergency training kicking in even as their hearts pounded in their chests. Down in the enclosure, the sudden explosion of noise and agitation from above had startled the gorillas. The young male stopped his play, peering up with wide, nervous eyes. The grooming pair froze mid-stroke, their heads cocked in alarm. But it was Hannah who reacted most decisively. She rose to her full, impressive height, a movement that commanded immediate attention. Her dark eyes, usually so placid and observant, were now sharp and intensely focused. She looked up at the agitated humans lining the barrier, a sea of distressed faces. Then her gaze dropped to the small, motionless form of Daniel lying near the edge of her territory. A fresh wave of terror, colder and more profound, washed over the crowd. This was it, the moment everyone instinctively feared. A powerful, wild animal, her territory invaded, her troops' routine violently disrupted by a strange, small creature and the cacophony from above. The narrative was pre-written in the minds of many, fueled by primal fears and popular depictions of such animals. Territorial aggression, a defensive attack, a tragic, unavoidable end for the helpless child. Some parents quickly shielded their children's eyes, others turned away, unable to bear witness to what they believed was inevitable. Emily Carter was sobbing uncontrollably, her body shaking, her husband holding her tight, his own face pale and etched with a desperate, raw anguish that mirrored her own. Hannah began to move, not with a sudden, aggressive charge, as many had braced themselves for, but with a slow, deliberate gait. Each heavy step she took seemed to resonate in the profound silence that had once again fallen over the onlookers, a silence punctuated only by Emily's ragged, gasping breaths and the distant, incongruous sounds of the zoo. She ambled across the grassy expanse, her powerful shoulders rolling with each movement, her massive form a silhouette of impending doom against the bright afternoon sun. She approached the spot where Daniel lay. He hadn't moved. A tiny whimper, almost inaudible from above, escaped his lips, the only sign he was still conscious. Hannah reached him. She towered over his small, fragile body, a dark mountain of fur and muscle. The crowd held its collective breath, braced for the worst. Zoo staff, including Mr. Peterson, were now positioned at the keeper access points, their expressions taut, ready to implement emergency protocols, but any sudden action on their part could escalate the situation, potentially provoking the very aggression they desperately hoped to avoid. They had to wait, to observe, to see what Hannah would do, their hopes dwindling with every passing, agonizing second. Then, something extraordinary, something utterly unexpected, happened. Hannah did not roar. She did not strike out. Instead, she lowered her massive head, her dark eyes, surprisingly soft and curious, fixed on the child. She sniffed gently at his bright yellow t-shirt, her large nostrils flaring slightly. Daniel, perhaps roused by her immense proximity or her unfamiliar scent, let out another soft cry, a sound of pain and bewildered fear. What followed was a display of such unexpected tenderness that it left everyone speechless, their ingrained terror momentarily forgotten, replaced by a stunned, profound disbelief. Hannah extended a huge, leathery hand, her long, thick fingers capable of snapping thick bamboo stalks with ease or delivering a blow of immense force. But her touch, when it came, was incredibly gentle. She nudged Daniel softly, almost as if testing for a response, a flicker of life. Then, with a delicacy that belied her immense strength and wild nature, she carefully, almost tentatively, scooped him up. She didn't grab him. She didn't drag him. She cradled him. One massive arm went beneath his small back. The other carefully supported his legs. She lifted him as a mother gorilla might lift her own infant, her movements slow, deliberate, and measured. Daniel, dazed and injured from the fall, offered no resistance, his small head lolling against her powerful, warm chest. The sight was surreal, almost dreamlike. The formidable silverback gorilla, an animal often portrayed as a fearsome, unpredictable beast, holding a human child with what could only be described as protective, almost maternal care. With Daniel secure in her embrace, Hannah turned. She didn't retreat further into her enclosure, nor did she show any signs of agitation or possessiveness towards the child, as one might expect from an animal with a captured prey or a defended young. Instead, she began to walk, with the same deliberate, unhurried pace, towards a specific point at the edge of the habitat, the service door, the reinforced steel access point used by zookeepers for feeding, cleaning, and veterinary care. It was as if she understood, with some deep, innate intelligence, that this was where help would come from, that this was where the child needed to be delivered. The crowd watched, mesmerized, a silent, collective gasp rippling through them. The fear had not entirely vanished, but it was now inextricably mingled with a dawning sense of awe, of witnessing something truly profound and inexplicable. Zookeepers, their faces etched with a mixture of intense tension and cautious, burgeoning optimism, stood ready at the service gate. They had a clear view now, and what they saw was almost beyond belief, beyond any training scenario they had ever run. Hannah was not just carrying the boy. She appeared to be actively protecting him, shielding his small, vulnerable form with her own substantial body as she moved across the uneven terrain. As she neared the gate, she paused. She looked directly at the keepers, then down at Daniel nestled in her arm, then back at the keepers. It was a look that seemed to convey a message, a silent cross-species understanding that transcended words. Gently, carefully, she lowered herself and laid Daniel down on the ground, just a few feet from the gate, in clear view and easy reach of the zoo staff. She didn't abandon him abruptly. She placed him with the same astonishing care she had used to pick him up, making sure he was settled on the soft grass before she slowly withdrew her supporting arm. Then, Hannah did something even more remarkable, something that solidified the narrative of her heroism. She remained seated near Daniel, not in an aggressive or threatening posture, but almost as if she were standing guard, ensuring his safety until the keepers could reach him. She even kept other, more curious gorillas in her troop at a distance with a soft, low rumble, a clear vocal signal that they were not to approach the child or the unfolding situation at the gate. It was a clear, unambiguous act of protection, a deliberate intervention. The head keeper, Mr. Peterson, a man with graying temples who had worked closely with Hannah and her troop for over a decade, spoke softly, his voice calm and reassuring, though his heart was still hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. "Easy, Hannah. Good girl," he murmured, more to soothe his own nerves than with any expectation she would understand the words. He slowly, carefully, unlatched and opened the heavy service gate. Another keeper beside him, equipped with a medical kit and a transport stretcher. Hannah watched them, her expression unreadable but notably not hostile. As Mr. Peterson took a cautious step into the enclosure, Hannah made no move to stop him, no gesture of aggression. She simply watched, her dark eyes following his every move. Mr. Peterson reached Daniel and quickly, expertly, assessed him. The boy was conscious, whimpering softly, but alive. There was a nasty cut on his forehead, already beginning to swell, and he was clearly in shock, pale and trembling, but there were no immediately obvious signs of life-threatening injuries from Hannah's handling, only from the significant fall itself. Mr. Peterson gently lifted Daniel into his arms. As he did, he glanced at Hannah, who was still sitting patiently nearby. Their eyes met for a brief, profound moment. In hers, Mr. Peterson thought he saw not aggression, not fear, but something akin to concern, or perhaps a quiet awareness of the gravity of the situation. It was a fleeting thought, perhaps anthropomorphism born of an intensely stressful situation, but the impression stuck with him, coloring his perception of the event for years to come. With Daniel secured, Mr. Peterson and the other keeper backed slowly out of the enclosure, never turning their backs on Hannah until they were safely through the gate. Hannah watched them go. Then, with a soft grunt that seemed to signal the end of her involvement, she turned and ambled back towards the center of her habitat, rejoining the other gorillas who had watched the entire, unprecedented drama unfold with a mixture of curiosity and palpable apprehension. It was as if, her extraordinary duty done, she was returning to her normal life, the incident already receding into the rhythm of her day. Outside the enclosure, the scene was one of chaotic, overwhelming relief. Emily Carter, who had been on the verge of collapse, supported by her husband, rushed forward as Mr. Peterson emerged with Daniel in his arms, her cries now ones of overwhelming gratitude and unbridled joy. Mark was by her side in an instant, his hand on her shoulder, his eyes, wet with tears, fixed on his son. Paramedics, who had arrived swiftly on the scene, took over immediately, their professional calm a soothing presence. They expertly examined Daniel, gently bandaging his bleeding head, checking his vitals, and preparing him for transport to the nearest hospital for a full and thorough checkup. The crowd, which had been eerily silent during the tense rescue, erupted into a spontaneous wave of applause, cheers, and emotional exclamations. Some people were openly crying, others were hugging strangers, united by the shared experience of witnessing something truly miraculous, something that defied easy explanation. Daniel, as it turned out, had suffered a concussion and a broken arm from the fall, along with various cuts and bruises. He was incredibly lucky. The 15-foot drop on a hard earth could easily have been fatal. But he had survived, not just the fall, but the potentially lethal encounter with a powerful silverback gorilla. And not only survived it, but he had been actively, demonstrably rescued by her. The news of Hannah's incredible actions spread like wildfire. Reporters from local and national news outlets descended on Redwood Creek Zoo, and the story of the gentle giant who saved a child became a global sensation. Suddenly, Hannah wasn't just another gorilla in a zoo exhibit. She was a hero, a symbol of interspecies compassion, a living testament to the hidden depths of animal intelligence and empathy. Skeptics, as they always do, tried to rationalize her behavior. Perhaps she was confused by the small, inert form. Perhaps she saw the child as a doll or a strange new plaything. Or perhaps her maternal instincts, though she had no recent offspring of her own, had simply and unusually kicked in. But for those who had witnessed it firsthand, the terrified parents, the stunned onlookers, the seasoned zookeepers like Mr. Peterson, it felt like something more, something deeper. They had seen the deliberation in her movements, the undeniable gentleness in her touch, the protective way she had shielded the boy and then purposefully delivered him to the access point of safety. It didn't feel random. It felt intentional, purposeful, an act of reasoned compassion. In the days and weeks that followed, a new kind of attention focused on Hannah. Visitors flocked to Redwood Creek Zoo in unprecedented numbers, not just to see a gorilla, but to see her, the hero gorilla. They brought handmade signs expressing gratitude. Some even left flowers near the zoo entrance, though these couldn't be given to her directly for safety and health reasons. and they brought with them a profound sense of respect and wonder. The zoo staff, while naturally wary of sensationalizing the event and anthropomorphizing animal behavior too excessively, couldn't deny the extraordinary, unique nature of what had occurred. They continued to treat Hannah with the same meticulous care and deep respect as always, but perhaps now with a deeper understanding, a new appreciation for the complex, sentient being that resided within that powerful silverback form. Hannah herself seemed entirely unfazed by her newfound international fame. She continued her days much as before, foraging for the fresh fruits and vegetables provided by the keepers, interacting with her troop members, resting in her favorite sunny spots, and observing the humans who now watched her with a different kind of gaze. She showed no discernible change in her behavior, no awareness of the global conversation she had sparked. Yet, something fundamental had changed. The perception of her, and perhaps of all gorillas, had shifted for many people around the world. The incident challenged long-held, often fearful, preconceived notions of wild animals as solely instinct-driven, dangerous, and unpredictable creatures. It opened a window into the possibility of a more profound emotional and cognitive life within these animals than many had previously considered or been willing to accept. The Carter family, after the initial trauma and the overwhelming relief of Daniel's recovery, found themselves forever bound by an invisible thread of gratitude to the gentle giant who had saved their son. They made several quiet, unpublicized visits back to the zoo in the following months, not for any public spectacle, but to simply stand and watch Hannah from a distance, a silent, heartfelt thank you in their hearts. Daniel, too young to fully comprehend the magnitude of what had happened or the danger he had been in, would sometimes point at Hannah from his father's arms and say her name, a flicker of recognition, perhaps, or just the association of her powerful image with a pivotal, if hazy and dreamlike, moment in his young life. The story of Hannah and Daniel became a modern fable, a poignant reminder that compassion and heroism can appear in the most unexpected of forms and from the most unlikely of saviors. It spoke to a deep-seated human desire to connect with the natural world, to find echoes of our own better natures, our capacity for empathy and altruism in the other creatures with whom we share this planet. Hannah, the silverback matriarch of Redwood Creek Zoo, had not been trained to perform such a feat. No zookeeper had prompted her actions. She had simply seen a child in distress, a small, vulnerable being in her domain, and she had acted. She had acted with a gentleness that belied her formidable strength, with an intelligence that defied simple, instinct-based explanation, and with a compassion that resonated deeply and powerfully with everyone who heard her remarkable story. The world, for a little while, seemed a slightly better, more wondrous place, knowing that such an act of interspecies kindness was possible. The image of the massive gorilla cradling the small, injured boy became an enduring symbol of hope and the surprising, often underestimated, bonds that can exist across the species divide. Hannah, in her quiet, unassuming way, had taught humanity a profound lesson about the true nature of heroism and the vast, often underestimated, capacity for empathy within the animal kingdom. Her actions on that sunlit Saturday afternoon in California echoed far beyond the confines of Redwood Creek Zoo, leaving an indelible mark on the hearts and minds of millions, a quiet but powerful testament to the gentle giant who, when faced with a life in peril, chose to save it. The zoo, of course, meticulously reviewed its safety protocols in the wake of the incident. Railings around gorilla highlands were heightened, and additional, more subtle, non-intrusive barriers were considered and implemented to prevent any recurrence. The incident, despite its miraculous outcome, was a stark reminder of the constant vigilance and respect required when humans and powerful wild animals are in close proximity, even in the most well-managed and thoughtfully designed environments. But beyond the practical lessons learned and the safety enhancements made, there was a lingering, pervasive sense of wonder. Mr. Peterson, the head keeper, often found himself watching Hannah during the quiet moments of the early morning or late afternoon when the crowds had thinned. He would recall that extraordinary moment of eye contact at the service gate, the calm, profound intelligence he was certain he had seen in her gaze. He remained convinced, deep in his professional and personal core, that what Hannah did was not a fluke, not a misinterpretation of a stimulus, not a random act. It was a choice, a compassionate, protective, and astonishingly intelligent choice. The seasons changed at Redwood Creek Zoo. Summer faded into the crisp, colorful embrace of autumn, with leaves turning brilliant shades of gold and red, then transitioned into the quiet chill of a mild California winter. Daniel Carter recovered fully from his injuries, the scar on his forehead eventually fading to a faint, silvery line, a subtle reminder of his extraordinary adventure. He grew, as children do, the direct memory of the fall and his unlikely rescuer becoming more of a story told to him by his parents, a cherished family legend, rather than one he vividly recalled himself. But the essence of it, the core truth of the gorilla who saved him, would forever be a part of his personal history, a unique and wondrous legacy. Hannah, too, continued her life within the familiar confines of Gorilla Highlands. She remained the respected matriarch of her troop, a focal point of the exhibit, a creature of habit and quiet dignity. Perhaps she never thought again of the small, yellow-clad child she had held so briefly, so gently. Or perhaps, in some way only she could understand, in the deep, complex recesses of her gorilla consciousness, the memory remained, a fleeting image, a scent, an echo. What was certain was that for the humans who knew her story, whether they had been there that day or had only heard about it, she would never be just another gorilla. She was Hannah, the savior, a gentle giant whose actions on one fateful afternoon spoke volumes about the heart that beat within her powerful chest. Her legacy was not one of ferocious power, though she possessed that in abundance, but of profound, unexpected tenderness, a living example of empathy that transcended the traditional boundaries of species, an enduring story of a day when a gorilla became a hero. The echoes of that day continued to ripple outwards, a quiet but powerful reminder of the extraordinary capacity for kindness and compassion that can be found in the most surprising of places and in the most unexpected of beings.